So yesterday on my website I had posted that I was out shopping and I had come across a journal while I was antique shopping. I was in Winterhold, I had stopped by Birna's Oddments, and I found a very interesting book that had been handwritten by an Imperial. Specifically, the thing of interest was a harrowing encounter in which this person was recapping, including some very detailed artwork. In fact, the person goes on to say that the reason they were able to recapture this moment is because it lives on in their nightmares, and it described something that was pretty horrific. So naturally I was intrigued, and being that I was already in Winterhold, I stopped by the scholars at the Mages Guild there. I asked them some questions. I also contacted some additional Imperials, both people that are in the military, you know, captains, legates, things like that, to see if they knew of anything. I sent some letters to the Synod Council, and eventually I was able to piece together exactly what this one Imperial soldier had encountered. The image from the journal shows a massive, fire-breathing dragon that laid waste to the defenses of the Legion when it first came upon them. The soldier describes them putting up a wall of shields that this dragon easily broke through and essentially laid fire all across the mountainside. There was no way that anybody could dodge it, and the more soldiers that they threw at this thing, the more ferocious it became. Ultimately, the Legion had to turn around and flee. Only a small handful of survivors made it out, and as such, this person recounted it in their journal. As I said before, we now know exactly what beast this was, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at it for scientific purposes. This hulking beast turns out to be a wildfire dragon. These dragons are native to the mountainous areas of Skyrim, and as you can see, this is a 6/6 creature in strength that costs 7 magicka. It is a dragon, and much like the person in the journal was saying, it does have breakthrough. It will smash through some defenses, and also it does breathe fire. In this case, on the card, that manifests itself as a summon ability that does 1 damage to all creatures. Now that's interesting because that's going to be your opponent's and yours, and it's regardless of lane. Now, the journal described a dragon that was becoming more ferocious the more creatures that were being thrown at it, or in the case of the journal, soldiers. That manifests itself on the card in the form of Slay +1/+1. Now, this card is interesting for a number of reasons, at least in my opinion. One, the summon effect hits everything on the board, so it's like a mini ice storm that's on a body. Now, it's interesting because it also has Slay, so if you kill a bunch of tiny creatures, then instead of paying 7 for a 6/6 with breakthrough, you could easily be looking at like a 9/9 or a 10/10 body with the proper setup. It's interesting because it can kill your own creatures and or your opponents, so you kind of have to play around that or use it to your benefit. You could, for example, play cards like the Gristlehide Dreg and get some self-triggers, or you could play creatures that have ward but benefit from the ward being broken, like Breton Conjurer. Other reasons that I think this card are interesting are the Slay. So this is something that for a control deck would be pretty favorable at making trades, because it would hopefully stick around past the first and maybe even the second trade, depending on what you're crashing it into. Now, the one drawback to that is breakthrough in this case, because if you're using this as a control player, there's a chance that that extra damage might bleed over and break a rune. However, again, with the summon ability of hitting everything on the board, and then the Slay ability of getting bigger and at least attempting to maintain a little bit of your health, there is some potential for this to be used in a late game control capacity. Other cards that this immediately reminded me of were things like Skaven Pyromancer, but it's not going to fill necessarily the same role, in my opinion, because Skaven comes down early to take down those early weak creatures and kind of helps you stabilize as a control player, whereas this is going to be coming down much later, and by the time this is on the board, you're less likely to see things with 1 health. Not to say that there won't be those creatures, and or you couldn't use attacks to maybe set up this killing things, but it's not going to have the same like on curve level of impact that a Skaven Pyromancer would. Skaven Pyromancer is also lane specific, where again this hits the entire board, which I still find very, very interesting. This card could potentially synergize with Mundus Stone the same way that Odahviing does, in that if you do roll lethal as the random keyword, then you could just be looking at a straight board wipe if they don't have any wards, or if they don't have like a black dragon that is immune to lethal. So that's really interesting. And we haven't seen much of the set yet. I know that card reveals are coming fast and furious now as we approach the release date, but it is worth noting that it is a dragon. We've been told that we can expect some sort of dragon tribal synergies, so we can't discount that as well. And overall, I really like the card and it intrigues me. I could see this being played in maybe some mid-range Archer decks or control decks that might be coming out of Archer, just because, again, it hits the whole board. It could certainly serve as an activator for finish-offs, leaf lurkers, and things like that. Again, at 7, it's kind of an expensive trigger, but it's the sort of thing that is just like an added benefit on top of. If you were playing the Reaver, right, this could be that potential setup to a big swing on the following turn, because this is a 7-cost card and Reaver does cost 8, so that could be a on-curve big body into a big body and clear a bunch of stuff setup. But again, at that point, like if your opponent has a bunch of stuff in the lane that the Reaver would kill, and you're playing this and then playing Reaver to clean it up, you might be losing already anyway. So it's hard, at least at this point, without seeing some of the other cards that are going to be revealed and or could synergize with this, to determine exactly how good this is. But there's enough here that it is at least interesting to me in a very subtle way. Again, the fact that it hits everything on the board means that there are some opportunities for self-abuse, meaning pinging your own creatures. There are opportunities for using it as a control card because it does hit both lanes. The Slay, again, is not necessarily like the most amazing thing in the world, but you could very easily see this creature, you know, trading into a 3/3 and then trading into another 3/3 and then going on and on and on, and maybe getting some value there. I think the obvious card to consider comboing with this would be the Night Mother, because the 0/1 tokens are certainly going to die from the summon ability and then immediately pump this bad boy up. So if you play a Night Mother early and you're just jamming out some 0/1 tokens and you're not getting a chance to kill him, this guy can come in and clean up pretty quickly. So yeah, he's a big-bodied threat. He does have Breakthrough. If there are no changes to Unstoppable Rage, he could also very well be an interesting target for that as well. So you could play him, maybe, you know, clean up some creatures with the summon effect, but, you know, worst case scenario, he's still a 6/6, which is kind of hard to kill. Could be, you know, 7/7, 8/8, 9/9, again, with the Breakthrough, and then you come in on the following turn with an Unstoppable Rage and really get some impact. So just things to consider. I love the art. I think the art is fantastic. Who doesn't love dragons? Who doesn't love giant fire-breathing dragons that are chewing through a whole host of people? So yeah, let me know what you think. I would love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your insights. I want to hear how you would consider using the card. As I said, he's generating a lot of ideas for me because he's got a kind of a unique ability. So it's nothing that we haven't seen before. We've seen things that ping other creatures. We've seen things like Skaven Pyromancer that ping our own and ping the enemies. But we still haven't seen something like this where the whole board is affected. We haven't seen something that has like this level of ping plus the Slay on top of it. Yeah, I got some wheels turning. I'd love to know if you think it's going to be good enough, if you think that it's too much of a detriment because the summon isn't a big enough impact. That's often the judge of how good these late game cards are. Does it make a big enough impact the moment it comes into play? So you would compare this card versus, say, like Belligerent Giant that costs 7. Belligerent Giant is a 7/4 but has an amazing summon. Whether or not this summon is enough to, you know, crack into that slot or make a dent will, I guess, largely be, you know, dependent on the other cards that are revealed and how the meta unfolds. So, yeah. But again, I'll say it for the third time, and then I promise we're going to wrap up. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear other people's input. I'm excited to at least test it out and try it. Hooray! Heroes of Skyrim is coming. Again, June 29th. And hope to see you guys all on the ladder playing Shouts and Dragons and all that other fun stuff. Until next time, may you walk on warm sands.